Let's get into Nissan. And the reason why I want to talk about Nissan is because Nissan and Honda, I bet you didn't see that one coming, is going through a merger. Two Japanese companies are going through a merger. Make sure you guys hit a like for the algorithm, subscribe to the channel, and turn on your notifications. Let's rock.
A historic pivot for Japan's auto industry is underway. Honda and Nissan announced on Monday that they have started talks towards a potential merger. The move underlines the threat Chinese EV makers now pose to some of the world's heavyweight car makers. The integration would create the world's third largest auto group by vehicle sales after Toyota and Volkswagen, and would also give Nissan and Honda a chance to share resources in the face of intense competition. The companies also announced that smaller Mitsubishi, in which Nissan is top shareholder, was also considering joining. The chief executives of all three held a press conference in Tokyo. Honda CEO Toshihiro Mibe.
There is a rise of Chinese power and emerging forces, and the structure of the automobile industry is changing. What this means is that I believe that the value itself in terms of automobiles and mobility will change. Ultimately, we would like to lead the world once again. And you can think that today's discussion is the first step in consideration towards that direction.
Honda is Japan's second largest automaker and Nissan is its number 3. A deal would mark the biggest reshaping in the global auto industry since Fiat Chrysler and PSA merged in 2021 to create Stellantis. The two companies said they'd aim to wrap up talks around June 2025 and then set up a holding company by August 2026. Honda has a market capitalization of more than $40 billion, while Nissan is valued at about $10 billion. Honda said it will appoint the majority of the holding company's board. In a separate online press conference with the Foreign Correspondents Club of Japan on Monday, former Nissan chairman Carlos Ghosn gave his reaction to the news.
I'm going to go into Carlos shortly, so I want to get his perspective. Because Carlos is a former Nissan executive. He used to be the person that ran the company. And he was the person that I think he got arrested in China, or was it Japan? And he had to defect, and he was the person that wound up, going on a private plane and being stuffed inside of a box, and he escaped, and now he's in a country where you can't be extradited back to the country where he's saying that he was going against. But Carlos was a very, very decent, in my opinion, CEO that was overseeing operations, which included Nissan. Nissan is a dying automaker, and it's funny because I remember when the American automakers was upended by the Japanese automakers, and when the Japanese automakers came in, everybody said, "Oh man, the cars is too little, it's too stupid, it's never gonna hit here in the United States of America. America's like big and all of this other stuff." And then the Japanese automakers put American automakers on notice, so much so to where we started copying the way in which they sourced for and solved for problems, and that's when you got the Toyota way. That's where lean manufacturing came from. That's when Lean Six Sigma really started hitting, as far as people coming in, solving for problems, allowing for you to run more effectively, and then at the same time, have a better quality of product so that you can have a higher resale value, and your cars hold their value over a period of time. And so it's funny because the American automakers was upended by the Japanese. The Japanese were upended by the Koreans, right? Remember when the Koreans first came here and you had Hyundai, and you had Kia, and people said, "Oh man, they quality so bad. Nobody wants those cars. They just fake Japanese cars and all of this stuff." Now, everybody is saying Kia is leading the way with design innovation, and Hyundai is leading the way with design innovation. Excuse me. And Genesis is the new luxury brand that's now upended the market. And so now you see a reckoning that is happening with Honda and Nissan, and they are failing. And so what they're trying to do is merge so that they can then have what we call synergy. Synergy is when you make some of the same products and you're able to spread out the costs amongst multiple different brands, while at the same time limiting the amount of costs and then saving on manufacturing. So for example, synergy could be, well, we don't need 2 human resource departments. We can save money by merging it, having 1 human resource department control both companies. And then at the same time, we can create platforms to where we just change the design language as far as how it applies to different vehicles that come to the market. But then we save money on cost by having the same cars manufactured inside of the same plant. We just gonna change the body panels. We gonna change the marketing. We gonna change all of that. I'll give you an example. BMWs, for example, are in a lot of ways the same cars as Rolls Royces. Audis, in a lot of ways, is the same platforms as used for Lamborghinis. So when you see a Lamborghini Irus, you're really looking at an Audi Q7 souped up. And if you start to go under the car, you can see some of the same parts that's being shared across multiple different platforms. And so they buy these brands and then they remarket them as individual companies, but they have synergy while at the same time saving costs for manufacturing. And what that does is I can lean into the thing that you do great. You can lean into my brand heritage and the thing that I do great. We can lean into each other's dealership network and hopefully save the company. But there will be a lot of layoffs and a lot of jobs lost once these companies merge, because you do not need 2 human resources departments. You won't need as much manufacturing capacity. You won't need this. You won't need that, right? So when you see this type of stuff happen, what you're seeing is survival, and you also see synergy, which largely means that we're trying to make sure that we maintain profit margins while eliminating costs. Okay, this is former CEO Carlos talking about this merger and what's going to happen.
Nissan, Honda, Nissan.
And I do plan on buying a GTR probably this year. I do want to buy Godzilla because I know that this company is never going to be the same.
Nissan going after Honda. Is this a pragmatic deal, Carlos, or a desperate roll of the dice?
No, in my opinion, it's a desperate move. It's not a pragmatic deal because, frankly, the synergies between the 2 companies are difficult to find. There is practically no complementarity between the 2 companies. They are on the same markets. They have the same products. Yep. The brands are very, very similar. So in a certain way, from one side, Nissan, it's a desperate move to try to find the future. And from the other side, Honda, which, if I understand well, they were not very excited about this move. But, you have to count with Meti in Japan. That means the Meti had a big say into it. So at the end of the day, they're trying to figure out something that could marry the short-term problems of Nissan and the long-term vision of Honda.
Do you think Nissan?
And it doesn't always work. So I remember when Ford Motor Company, and I've spoken about this before, had what we called the Premier Automotive Group. And the Premier Automotive Group at the time was Ford owning and buying, and this is when profits was robust in the 90s, Ford buying and owning, and several other companies did it also. They were owning Mercury at the time. They had Ford, and then they had Lincoln. All right, and the Navigator had just came out. It was absolutely killing it with profits with the Navigator and the Expedition, and even the Excursion at the time. And so they own Mercury, which was basically supposed to be like the mid-tier from Ford, and then Lincoln was supposed to be the top tier. But what they did was they purchased the Premier Automotive Group, or they started what's called the Premier Automotive Group, and they started merging brands, right? And so they were using some of the same platforms to manufacture some similar vehicles. So you may have seen a Ford Contour, right? And now a lot of y'all may not even know about that car. A Ford Contour, which may have had the exact same platform as a Jaguar, right? The baby Jaguar, right? And so they bought Jaguar, they bought Land Rover, I believe, and they had bought one more company. But anyways, I think it was Aston Martin at the time. Yeah, it was Aston Martin, Land Rover, and it was Jaguar, I believe. And they owned all of those companies, but they marketed the brands separate, and then they tried to make sure that they used some of the same cost-saving synergies in order to have those brands stand alone. The problem is that people didn't see any differences a lot of times with those brands standing alone. And when you seen the 2008 crisis hit, what Ford did prior to that was they sold off all of those brands so that they could focus more on doing the things great that they did inside of Ford Motor Company, making good trucks, F-Series, all of that. They focused on the cash cows and the profit margins, instead of just focusing on all of these different brands that kept them distracted, and they kept all of their resources in a whole bunch of places. Killed Mercury, kept Ford, kept Lincoln, focused on trucks, focused on their profit margins, focused on surviving through the 2008 crisis, got rid of the Premier Automotive Group. That's why you see Jaguar is now owned by an Indian company. Same thing with Land Rover, and Aston Martin is Aston Martin, right? Same thing with General Motors. They bought all of these different brands. One of the brands that they killed was Saab. A lot of y'all may not be familiar with that. General Motors owns Saab, but there was a lot of cross-platform. So, for example, the Saab SUV was very similar, was on the same platform as the Trailblazer at the time. And so you've seen that. You've seen that. And a lot of people were sad when they killed Saab. They killed Saab. They killed Saturn. At the time, they also got rid of Hummer, and it was going through bankruptcy. They brought Hummer back as an EV platform. They still own the brand, but they're not necessarily trying to promote it the same way that they did before. Same thing with all of these other brands. Volkswagen is one of the largest automotive groups, and that's what they did.
Nissan is being put, do you think Honda is being pushed into this deal by the economy ministry? There's politics pushing this deal, Carlos, rather than the value of the deal?
Without any doubt for me. That means having lived in Japan for so many years, I understand how influent can the Métis be. And I can tell you that from all the data that I received about the performance of Nissan, which has been miserable for the last, at least for the last 2 to 3 years, they have cash problem, they have investment problems.
Yep. They only got like less than a year's worth of cash on hand to be able to survive as a company. You're going to see a lot of automakers die. You're going to see a lot of automakers die. They are going away. And so it's going to be a survival of the fittest. And now they're fearful of Chinese companies coming inside the United States of America and trying to kill everything.
Hammered in the United States. They got practically out of Europe. They're being challenged in China. And there is no plan in front of it. So I can tell you that there is panic mode inside Nissan.
Well, if they're in panic mode, it then pushes the idea that the economy ministry, as you say, are in a do whatever it takes moment for Nissan.
Yeah, well, there is, in my opinion, there is no industrial logic to it. But as you know, there is a moment where you have to choose between performance and control. Obviously, if you can have both, it's the better. But there are moments where you have to choose. And without any doubt,
super chats. I'll be reading those shortly.
With the Métis and everything I know from it, they prefer control on performance. So they pushed Honda into the deal without any doubt.
Well, with that in mind then, Carlos, what kind of backstops? I mean, you've dealt with the Japanese, you've dealt with Nissan, you understand the metrics to get these organizations together. Is the government going to have to deliver backstops to Honda to make this deal work?
No, I think they in a certain way tried to push Honda onto this deal. Obviously, Honda must have some kind of benefit out of it. If not on the short term, at least on the mid and the long term. But that will be closely monitored to make sure that the impact on the Japanese society is not going to be too big. Because, when you have two companies of this size and practically in the same market with practically the same strengths and the same weaknesses, there are going to be a lot of costs to be taken out, and there are going to be a lot of duplication to be taken out. So this is going to be closely monitored by the Métis.
You doubt that the synergies are there, though?
Well, I can tell you that it's on the short term, I don't see too much synergy. Obviously, you go to the classical one, which is purchasing together to try to leverage a better scale. But this is something that Nissan has done with Renault successfully in the past, except that at this moment, it's really concentrated in Japan.
I think that Nissan is going to have to go away. Basically, whatever it is that they had going on over at Nissan, I don't think you can keep it in the same frame that it is and think that it's going to survive. Nissan is going away. They may take the names, they may take the brand, and then they may fold over a lot of what Nissan was marketing to people and try to sell products based off of that. They may come out with a new GTR, but it's going to be based off of Honda technology and stuff like that. And so Nissan is in survival mode. They bleeding cash. They can't sell cars inside of the United States of America. It's getting tight. I also think that the dealership network is going to shrink, and they're going to be selling Nissans inside of Honda. And I don't think Honda even really want Nissan like that. But Nissan is making themselves so available and probably being incentivized by the Japanese government in order to save the companies and save jobs. But we'll see what's going on. I'll keep you guys in the loop of what's happening with that.